Sometimes it can be taken for granted just how challenging it is in order to keep video games readily accessible. Out of all the different art forms out there, video games inherit just about every preservation obstacle there is, with a disheartening amount of video games at risk of never seeing the light of day again. For the longest time, emulation has been the primary interface in order to keep entire libraries playable. This in of itself can be seen as a miracle because original hardware solutions can't last forever. Attempts to maintain some form of console hardware compatibility have failed miserably. As awesome as PS2 support was for launch PS3s, it definitely wasn't enough to justify the outrageous price at the time. And despite the Wii U completely being compatible with 2 whole previous generations of supported hardware, only one was officially supported. It's no wonder emulation has evolved to be the most popular method to play discontinued games. Not to mention, with emulation, various enhancements and improvements can be made to the game that would never have been possible before on original hardware. Only problem is that emulation is just that, an emulation. So those who are extremely savvy towards an original game's behavior may take issue with how an emulated release plays. This is why we've seen alternatives to emulation surface recently, such as FPGAs, which tackles to replicate an original system's hardware configuration and behaviors and reproducing them on updated circuitry. I heavily support this kind of preservation since not everyone may be able to perform capacitor replacements or hardware mods. If someone's going to spend a few $100s to play 30-year-old games, they'd probably rather buy something more modern. Very recently, we've now seen complete decompilations and recompilations of select games. Quite unprecedented for retro games, but still extremely exciting to witness just what can be done to update and modernize a retro gaming experience. I may have spewed some controversial takes regarding a game's original experience being maintained, but even I concede that if the actual play experience can be improved upon, I'll greatly support that. So what I would like to do is highlight a few of the decomps and recomps that I've played and see how it could differ from standard emulation at this moment. This isn't going to be much of a direct matchup, as I find both necessary for long-term game preservation. One thing I hope to make perfectly clear is that just because a game gets a complete decompilation, it isn't a guarantee you can actually, play it. A full decompilation completely reverse engineers a game's original source code information, but a developer still has to make that code playable. This, above all else, takes time. Years. Full development staffs are created just to handle decent porting jobs. While it is exciting to see more games go through the compiling process, it'll take even longer to see them get playable releases. The important thing is that fans have access to a game's source code information. It goes without saying that you'll still need to provide your own, hopefully legally acquired copy of the game in order to perform the compiling process. To start, let's look at the Super Metroid decompilation. We can thank SNES Rev for working on a few Super Nintendo projects. Radsprower then created a launcher tool for the decomp to extract and compile the game with just one click. In settings, you'll find options for video, audio, and controls. Always appreciate it when a button remapper includes a controller diagram. It goes a long way to provide a point of reference if you're not familiar with the original controller the game was played with. There's also additional settings that would be great if your controller has extra buttons. I was looking forward to using the Switch Online controller because I'm a sucker for that authentic feel, but unfortunately this port doesn't seem to work with it. The controller syncs to Windows just fine and works in emulators like BSNES and RetroArch. I tried using BetterJoy to convert the controller to X input, but that still didn't work. Mapping buttons worked fine, but upon launching the game, X and A became duplicates of Y and B. Nothing I did within Windows controller settings and BetterJoy helped solve the issue. On the flip side, modern controllers work great. By choosing full screen, the game will boot in a native 768p resolution, an exact 3x scale of the game's original internal resolution of 256p. This does result in an upscale on higher resolution displays, causing pixels to look a little soft, but it's still plenty clean. The stretch setting will then toggle either a 4:3 aspect ratio or the game's original 8:7 aspect ratio. Borderless full screen scales the game to match your monitor's resolution to a nearest neighbor setting, with the stretch setting filling the screen. Not a fan of this look, but you do you. There's linear filtering in case you enjoy that look. There's disabled sprite limits, which is nice. HD mode 7 if you're into that. You can inject shaders if that fancies you. Love me some CRT shaders, but you have to use borderless full screen. Using full screen at that 768 resolution results in scan lines getting misaligned. Basically what this means is that you're stuck with the narrower aspect ratio if you want to use CRT filters, unless you can set your display itself to a 4:3 ratio. I've also had excellent results using the Tink 4K's filters. You can play with windowed mode if you want, as the game natively displays to whatever orientation you set. As far as the game itself, the thing about these new compiled releases is that there's no more emulation step for running the game. All rendering is now performed natively on whatever hardware you're using. Again, self-explanatory for modern games, but unprecedented for retro games. Now you just have to ask yourself if your gaming PC specs can natively run a Super Nintendo game. This does lead to a remarkably responsive playing experience. I experienced no perceptible input lag, and slowdown is completely non-existent. I'm not that sensitive to input lag, but I understand it's a big reason many don't like emulation. Playing this port and SNES back to back, I can say this port feels more responsive. Not that emulation is bad, I can still perform complicated tricks without much issue, but it does feel a little easier to do in the decomp. At this moment, you may be missing out on the kind of hacks and enhancements that's already present on emulation. The widescreen patch, for example, is designed to be used with SNES HD. ROM hacks like the Redux patch are really cool to play on emulators and original hardware via a flash card. If you can't wait until these enhancements are incorporated into the decomp, then emulation is still the one for you. Foregoing fancy hacks and patches, I will have to concede that I do prefer playing the decomp. In many ways, it does render the original cartridge and at least official emulation releases obsolete. Since Super Mario World doesn't currently have a launcher at the moment, we're working with a raw decomp here. There is a launcher for the All-Stars branch of Mario World by Stefani. Seems really cool to have all the other All-Stars game included, but in its current state, it's really buggy and I haven't been able to use it successfully. Until it's more stable, we're gonna stick with the bare respiratory. All configurations are done through Notepad, which certainly isn't my favorite method for changing settings, though it is better than nothing at all. For the most part, you have the options that were available for the Super Metroid port. The video settings are identical to before. Some settings like linear filtering didn't appear to do anything, so I'm not sure if they even work or not. I also couldn't get shaders to work. I'm pretty sure I'm setting up the config correctly, but with no success. I can only imagine they'd function identically to the Metroid port. I'm happy to report the Switch Online controller does in fact work this time. However, Windows sees it with the Xbox layout, so you'll have to swap A and B as well as X and Y to have the buttons actually line up. After that, we get to the game, and it's mostly the same story as Super Metroid. It runs really well here, with loading sections coming in even quicker than the original cartridge. The fade out at the end of levels is much smoother, the line on the map moves much quicker. It plays like a more optimized version of the game. As bare as the user interface is, this is still a neat way to experience Super Mario World. Like with Super Metroid, there doesn't seem to be support for ROM hacks or patches, but that doesn't mean it's impossible. Somebody's just gotta, do it.
Do it.
This does make emulation very appealing by comparison. ROM hacks speak for themselves, and I do think you owe it to try some of them out if you haven't already. The widescreen patch is awesome and a testament to how batshit insane fans can be to improve their favorite games. It really makes for a bad look on official devs who won't even let you buy and own the game anymore. As far as the core experience itself, if you're a stickler for performance and responsiveness, the decomp is the one for you. Regardless, the definitive version of Mario World remains the GBA version, but none of you are ready to hear that. The Link to the Past port from SNES Rev also received a launcher from Rad's Per Hour. It's basically the same as the Super Metroid launcher, but since the decomp includes a slew of additional features, there's more to play with. I'm sorry to say the wireless Super Nintendo controller still doesn't work. I guess if you really need that form factor, 8-bit DOE is probably your best bet. A lot of gameplay improvements that you might be familiar with from ROM hacks are included here and are greatly appreciated. I keep it pretty minimal, but I really enjoy being able to turn while dashing. You may say it's cheap, but Nintendo officially had this feature in that forgotten Zelda Satellaview game. The reworked item menu is awesome, letting you map 3 additional items. This makes using items so much more fun just because it's less time spent in the menus, resulting in slicker gameplay. There's MSU support, which is nice, HD Mode 7, which looks really cool on the map. The video options are identical as Super Metroid, but now we have the inclusion of extending the vertical lines of resolution, turning 8x7 into 1:1, or pixel perfect, leading to a more narrow look. It also makes the 4:3 proportions a little wider. There's also now native widescreen. For the most part, it looks awesome, but it does look a little weird to see parts of the game pop in and out. but honestly it's not that distracting. The extra real estate just makes the game feel more epic and fun to explore. Otherwise, the same performance boosts are minor yet still appreciated. Between screen transitions, door transitions, or general loading, the faster speeds add up. Compared to emulation, you're really only missing out on whatever extra stuff the Redux patch improves, as well as other patches. But really, most of the best stuff is included with the decomp, and the smoother play feel and improved responsiveness, as well as widescreen, really pulls in the decomp's favor. I don't want to compete the two together too much, as they both serve different purposes, but in almost every case, the decompilation port would be the one I prefer to play. This is especially relevant when we get to N64 games. The consensus from what I can tell is that N64 emulation today still isn't as reliable as emulation for other, more popular consoles. Many N64 games have unique quirks that's been difficult to adapt in emulation. This ultimately has made it a much bigger deal for the N64's library to receive new decompilations. I remember the first game to really turn heads was the Mario 64 Windows port. A project so impactful it alone made 3D All-Stars look bad by comparison. But since customizing options involves creating a new build every single time, then it would take forever to cover what's been done. I'd rather move on to the other projects which are far more comprehensible. What I love about the various N64 Decomps from Harbor Masters is having an integrated UI for the game now. The included options are staggering and can be a tad overwhelming if you're not already familiar with the game. This is honestly at its worst with the Ship of Harkinian port, but that's only because the mod support for Ocarina of Time is incredibly high. It is liberating to have complete control over most functions in the game, but it can take a while to craft your own tailored version. There's presets if you want to spend more time playing the game than playing with settings. The amount of control is staggering, but there are legitimate gameplay improvements that I feel most people would love to have. It goes without saying, but native control over the resolution and frame rate is a huge boost for N64 games. The control options are extremely flexible, and I'm happy to report the wireless N64 controller works perfectly. Though, thanks to gyro support, modern controllers become the preferred input device. If using the Ocarina without the C buttons scare you, using the D-pad instead works way better than it has any right to. I now expect the same amount of consideration should these games get a new official modern release. Beyond the basic video options, these ports have way more to play with compared to the previous decomps. If browsing through what's available looks a little daunting, Mr. Wise Guy just updated the static recompilation of Majora's Mask, which now includes mod support, with many mods already on offer. This feels the closest to modern PC gaming, with a launcher to run the game and to change a few core settings. Then, if you want to get more crazy, you can easily install mods to boost the experience. A lot of sensible enhancements that naturally lend to a smoother playing experience, and stuff I'd love to see in future official Zelda re-releases. It makes this release very competitive to the 3DS remake, which really only has the updated graphics now. I may not be a fan of most texture packs, but the fact that Neryl's textures look so good at native res goes to show how well done they are. I honestly wasn't sure if I could see the difference, but toggling them on and off shows that the added detail does surpass the originals. The low resolution just helps keep them from clashing too much with the models. If you do like using high resolutions, then it's still plenty of eye candy. The updated map is actually insane, and it hurts that this level of attention to detail would probably not be seen in an official release. I would kill to have this as a poster on my wall, it's that gorgeous. Between a decomp or recomp, I'll admit I prefer playing a recomp. The general experience is more user-friendly and feels the closest to what you'd expect from an official release. Hopefully it shouldn't be too much longer before more games receive this kind of treatment. I'm a firm believer in these ports being the new standard of retro gaming beyond emulation, for the flexibility to inject all kinds of legitimate gameplay improvements whilst also keeping the complete vanilla experience intact. I do feel it's important to some extent to allow players to play the game with the warts from the original experience, which brings us to the last release I'd like to talk about. Wasn't it a complete shock to find that a PC port of Sonic Unleashed was finished, and it was already available, and it works perfectly? People outside the Sonic community probably won't understand how big of a deal this is. Unleashed is a very mixed entry, but in recent years there's been a continuous growth in appreciation for this game. Only problem is that this game runs like absolute dog shit on its original release. For years, Sonic fans have been desperately trying in vain to play Unleashed, at least the day stages, with good performance. It started with the Unleashed project, which ported the stages to Sonic Generations on PC. This worked pretty damn well, albeit with a few tweaks to accommodate the Generations gameplay. Otherwise, this was more than enough to scratch the itch. Then Xbox, not Sega, provided a performance boost to the Series S and X release of Unleashed. For the first time, an official release of the game could finally be playable at a locked 60 FPS. It can't be undersold how much of a game changer it is, considering how fast the gameplay is. Literally bought my Series S just to play this particular game, and I know I'm not the only one. In this context, it doesn't matter if it's just emulation, it's still a better experience than vanilla hardware. Speaking of emulation, I gotta admit I'm not quite at the point of wanting to emulate 360 or PS3. From the looks of it, playing the game on Xenia can be a damn fine way to play, with some setup. But it's all irrelevant now thanks to the Unleashed Recompiled project. Once again, static recompilation may become the new norm beyond emulation just from how good this port is. It does take a bit of setup to dump a copy of the game from an Xbox 360, but once it's done, it's surreal how seamless it launches and plays. All the new features are tucked into a new settings menu, and I can't overstate how much of an authentic UI like this goes a long way for the general user experience. It functions as close to a modern PC game as you can expect, with full access to resolution, frame rate, and other graphic options. The little thing I love is that both console variants are represented here. Sure, you have to use an Xbox copy of the game, but PlayStation button icons, the absence of the color filter, and the faster day-night transitions make sure that version is represented also. We were already eating well with the Xbox Series port, but damn, with this recomp, I see no reason to play any other version anymore. Remember, the PS2 Wii release is effectively a different game. My Xbox has now been rendered completely obsolete. The gameplay of the Boost Sonic games is one of many discussions. Personally, I'll always fancy the Unleashed Generations approach, but the Hedgehog Engine 2 games are still plenty fun. That said, the playability of Unleashed Boost greatly goes up just from the higher res and frame rates. This is a game demanding insane reaction time. 60 FPS is plenty and worked great for Generations, but damn, at 120 and above, it's wild how much clearer obstacles become. The devs do warn against using frame rates higher than 60 as it could introduce bugs, but I haven't noticed anything noteworthy. Even the godforsaken Werehog is a lot more fun to play when it doesn't run like complete shit. I love how you can disable the Werehog battle music now. One of the few things Sonic fans agree on, and it's only because the Werehog stage music slaps that fucking hard. I'd love to see this applied to more games. The effect this port has had for the reception of Unleashed only makes it more exciting for more games to see this kind of treatment. Granted, it's still Unleashed, and many inherent design elements still make this a 6 out of 10 experience as far as a normal playthrough is concerned. But beyond that, at least there isn't a technical bottleneck to hold this game back any further. I hope to see more 360 games get this treatment since the marketplace is shut down and a large chunk of its library is now locked. Of course, such progress is going to continue to take astronomical amounts of time, but at least now it gives official developers a higher standard to meet. If fans can develop a release that lets you play a game in an undisputably superior way compared to what's officially available, then what would be the point in actually paying for it then? Should just about cover it for me today. Thanks for choosing to watch my video. How do you guys feel about these new decomps and recomps? Compared to emulation, it's apples and oranges. Both have their pros and cons, but as long as a game plays just fine, then it really doesn't matter how it's released. Playing Switch games on Switch 2 will be emulation, and that isn't going to matter one bit. But it's extra special when a game gets decompiled because it gives fans and developers the chance to really show what can be done to improve and enhance a game. Beyond that, I'd still call every decomp and recomp I've covered here the best version of their respective games. At worst, it's just a very well optimized version of the game that leaves virtually zero downsides and renders the original cartridge or disc obsolete. That should cover it for me today, so lastly I'll just say thank you for watching.